Hello, everybody. Thank you so much. It's so exciting seeing such a great group of people here, people who work in AI, practitioners, civil society members, general members of the public. We're all really glad to bring you here. So we are going to be beginning in a moment on our panel regarding AI and online gender-based violence. So just want to make sure everyone has a comfortable seat, and we do have overflow. We are screening it downstairs on the same level as the booths. So if you can't fit in here, you can always watch that live stream. Or for those of us who are tuning in online, hello. We're so glad you could join us. All right, so I am here today. My name is Sarah Amos. I am a program manager at Humane Intelligence, focusing on tech-facilitated gender-based violence. We're going to get to what that means in a minute. But I'm really honored to be here with this panel of esteemed experts here. We have a number of them. And how we're going to do this is I'm going to do a quick little round of intros because we only have 30 minutes. We want to get really deep into it. So first, I'm just going to introduce, we have to my right, Camille Stewart Gloucester. She is the CEO of CAS Strategies and also former Deputy National Cyber Director for Technology and Ecosystem. So quite exciting and happy to bring her. And then we have to my right, further right, Nikhat Dodd, the founder and executive director of Digital Rights Foundation. So really interested in getting her perspective, especially from legal point of view and the broader global majority. And then last but not least, we have Alexandra Reeve Givens, the president and CEO of the Center for Democracy and Technology, also known as CDT. So really excited to have the conversation with this wonderful group of women. But before we do that, TFGBV. So when I say that string of letters, like who knows what I'm talking about? Raise your hand. All right, a lot more than I thought. That's really great. That's really great. But for those of you who don't know, or who, if you're like me, often trip over the words, TFGBV means Tech Facilitated Gender-Based Violence. And it entails many things. And if you're curious and want to learn more, this is me promoting the booth downstairs where you can learn about the taxonomy that Humane Intelligence has been working on in partnership with both DCIT and FCDO from the UK. But at its core, what TFGBV is any act of gender-based violence perpetuated through digital means. So from cyber stalking to online harassment to image-based abuse, which entails the non-consensual sharing of intimate images, just to name a few. There are quite many, and they are increasingly pervasive, as we'll talk about in this conversation due to AI. And to quickly just paint a picture before we get into the effects of it from our experts. Why is AI changing this phenomenon that isn't new? Intimate image abuse has been around, unfortunately, since the advent of the internet. And it is similar to other online harms, such as misinformation, where AI allows the bad actors to reach a scale and level of automation not previously known. So the ability to create AI-generated text that can be used for harassment purposes, AI-created media such as deepfakes. And previously, what may have taken hours now only requires minutes for a harmful actor to initiate a great deal of harm at a widespread scale. The second reason that Gen AI is really supercharging the amount of TFGBV on the internet is accessibility. So the barrier of entry for somebody who wants to do this harm has become much lower, as the skill set has become much lower in order to manipulate media and create this harmful content. So we see this also with the rise of, quote, nudify apps that allow a user to remove the clothes of a person in an image in a photorealistic way. And that can be obviously quite harmful to a person who has not even taken their clothes off in the first place. And in a sense, it's democratizing harms. And then lastly, we have evasion capabilities. So the last 10, 20 years, we've had the trust and safety industry on at various platforms, improving their detection, content moderation methods. However, we're all in a new ballgame now. Technologies such as photo hashing have been successful for traditional images. However, it's become a bit of a cat and mouse game as new AI created types of harm have not yet found like a true solution to solve them. So with that context laid out, I wanted us to talk a little bit more about the current threat landscape beyond just the technological, so the social, the political, also the global policy landscape, so beyond just the global north, beyond just the United States. And then lastly, a bit of a call to action. What are the future directions? What can be done? So to get us started, I just wanted to ask my first question to Alex Givens from CDT. So how are recent changes in the platform's policies and the political landscape at large currently reshaping online gender-based violence?
Sure. Thank you for having me. And before I answer that question, I'm going to just share a little bit about the kind of perspective that I bring to this work. CDT is a 30-year-old nonpartisan organization that focuses on how technology impacts everyday users and their rights. And one of the spaces and ways that we work on this issue is by leading a task force of most of the major generative AI companies and social media companies, experts in image-based sexual abuse, experts in privacy and digital security and trust and safety, together identifying best practices for mitigating these types of harms. We also have a research team that goes out and explores prevalence. And one of the statistics that I think is interesting is work that recently came out of our education team that did a nationwide survey of students in the United States to ask about how exposed they were and how aware they were of non-consensual intimate imagery in their schools. 40% were aware of incidents of images doing the rounds in their schools. And 1 in 6 students in the United States is aware of deep fake-based NCI doing the rounds in schools. And one of the things that we pushed on is saying, well, how are schools responding to this? And for most students, 5% were aware, and we actually had the survey go to teachers as well, 5% were aware of schools helping students understand their rights for prevention and for taking this content down. 75% were aware of students being expelled or severely disciplined for this. So schools right now are taking a disciplinary frame, which is important and relevant, but not helping on the prevention and kind of the victim support side of it. So that's one area that we think is important. But going back to this bigger question in the landscape we're in now, look, there's been an elephant in the room the entire day of this conference, which is right now we are at a precipice in the battle for trust and safety. And the reason I say that it is being politicized in ways that this field has not been politicized before. I say that we are at a precipice and not over the edge because I think that all of us together can pull on those strings and pull it back. But it is an urgent mission facing us right now, including at this AI Action Summit this week, to not allow it to be woke, to care about questions of online gender-based violence, to not allow it to be fringe or dismissed, to research how fake images, online hate speech, online harassment impacts marginalized communities. But that is unfortunately exactly the direction the discourse is going in, and we have to reel it back because it's definitely not good for users and it's not what users want, but it's also not good for business, right? The platforms need to be addressing this content to be able to have healthy online environments for their users to be able to communicate and thrive. And so my mission, my dream is that we are bringing this back and continue to normalize what responsible trust and safety work looks like. When we say that it's being weaponized, you know, some examples right now, the threat on researchers doing work in this space is real. The National Science Foundation in the US has new restrictions on the types of research applications and grants that get screened and go through additional scrutiny. We've seen the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children just within the past 24 hours has had to remove language on its website addressing LGBTQ issues and in particular references to trans youth. And that environment is not conducive or healthy for robust trust and safety work. We also, unfortunately, have seen some companies begin to scale back on this. Somebody alluded earlier to Meta's content policy changes, which are just deeply troubling because they do scale back the environment for addressing in a serious way what online hate speech and harassment of marginalized groups and women in particular and LGBTQ people in particular can look like. So my call to action and something that I hope we can talk about is how we resist that trend using any language that we need to, but how we resist that trend so that it is not politicized to do this work, but instead goes back to the frame of just helping users have online experiences that they want, be able to protect their privacy and protect their rights. And again, that's good for users and it's good for businesses. And that is the online environment we should all be fighting for.
Yeah, that's a great point. And also a lot of what our research on TFGPV is finding is that perhaps strategically, the result of women receiving disproportionately compared to men, and also other marginalized genders receiving harassment, hate, all sorts of violence against them, is the desire to pull back and be less present in public spaces. And that also has, secondhand effects on society. I want to ask Camille a little bit more about your experience at a platform, and also bringing with that your experience in the White House as a former deputy cyber director. And then in a little bit, Nikat, I want to talk about how is this playing out in the rest of the world? But first, yes, what is in the recent changes? What are you thinking is happening inside of these companies right now vis-a-vis tech facilitated gender-based violence?
Yeah, a lot of tension. So I was in trust and safety at Google. I led the security policies and election integrity before going to the White House. And already in that landscape, right, thinking about global elections in 2020 and doing that work, there is a tension between business outcomes and the content you take down. And often, even the most responsible companies are balancing those things, particularly against a landscape where the decisions that you make and the justification for those decisions are then used by authoritative regimes to then conduct their own ends, right? So this isn't just about like business outcomes negatively impacting doing the right thing, but a real recognition that the decisions that you make and the justifications for that might work in one context, but be weaponized against you for outcomes that you don't want in other contexts. The other thing that a colleague said on the last panel was that there are some good people in trust and safety organizations who really went there to do the right thing. And as people started to realize more that trust and safety organizations are a place where you can kind of advance national security outcomes within the private sector context, there are a lot of people who had that background and that lens in trust and safety organizations. And so I think there are people inside who want to do the right thing. Particularly as you engage with some of these companies, people are at odds with some of the changes that their organizations are making. I bet you if you talk to a lot of people who work in the trust and safety departments at a Meta or any organization that has completely changed course, that they would express, if they're able to be candid, a frustration with this new direction and a tension with how do you advance even the things that remain in the community policies without it looking like you are not adhering to this new change in direction at a top level. So there's going to be a lot of tension in organizations from this moment. That woke ideology, thinking it's leftist to conduct content moderation, is something that looms large over government even before the transition in the US, but also in companies. And so as organizations worry about how they get funding, how they engage in policy discussions at a national and international level, they're going to start to think about how they reckon with that. That said, though, there are companies that recognize that it is a business imperative to recognize your humanity and your personhood and protect you from things like TGB, FB.
We all struggle with
right.
it.
Gender-based violence,
Gender-based
online gender-based
violence.
violence, right? They recognize that. That is a business imperative. If your users do not feel safe, there's no trust. And without trust, you're not going to spend your dollars. But that is actually if we do that, though. There is also a user driver there that we should speak with our time and speak with our engagement and use platforms that align with our values. I recognize that there are some monopolies out there on getting certain services, but we have an opportunity as individuals to use our voices through what platforms we engage with. This shift from X to things like Blue Sky is a really, and other platforms is a really demonstrative way for users to take ownership and drive business outcomes. So what I would say about the landscape, both from a government perspective and from a business perspective, is we are in a moment of tension, which is why I think the point made about us being on the precipice. There's an opportunity for change of direction, for industry to lead, industry and civil society to come together, which is why multi-stakeholder convenings that are not only state-led that drive AI governance and AI innovation are going to become even more of an imperative. one of the things that we did at the White House that was really important that I'll end on is making sure that more people from the ecosystem are around the table, small businesses, global majority countries, VCs, et cetera, because they all play a really important role. And I hope that as we move forward, even if that's not being driven at the state level, that that is a part of that multi-stakeholder dynamic.
Yeah, and thinking about multi-stakeholder involvement, especially internationally, I do want to pull in Nikhad. You and I were talking previously about how even well-intended trust and safety measures trying to protect women and women and minoritized genders can backfire and be repurposed. Can you add a little bit of color to those of us who are not as familiar as to what is happening across the world in this regard?
So it's very interesting for me to witness all of this, what is unfolding in the US, and because for us it's really not new. We have been raising alarms around tech facilitated gender-based violence for more than a decade now. In our context, we have seen how online violence has turned into offline harms against a woman and minorities, gender minorities. And I think what we have been telling for so long, now folks in the global north are actually experiencing. And I think it's a moment of opportunity for all of us. What we have been telling companies, governments, funders, that they really need to learn from global majority, from our context, what we have been experiencing for so long. And I think in terms of regulations also, for instance, I have been talking about how many governments around the world, especially from authoritarian context, are actually introducing laws that are not really there to protect women and minorities, because when they start talking about laws, they are like, we want to protect women and young girls in our countries, but the real intention is to censor speech, and censor political speech. That's what we are experiencing at the moment. Even in South Asia right now, there's so many laws that, a wave of, like new laws to deal with deep fake and AI, in the name of AI regulation. And those are really not good. So I think to be honest, I would advise everyone to actually just go back and see what we have been saying for so long in these spaces, because there is so much for everyone to learn, for all the stakeholders. And I would say, I have seen many women. We have a cyber harassment helpline that we have been running for 7-8 years now in Pakistan, and now we address complaints from South Asia as well. And I have seen our complainants actually, committing suicide. When states fail them, when their families fail them, they are being killed in the name of honor because of intimate images, and sometimes they are not even intimate images. So I think there's so much that we can learn from each other, but at the same time, I think one call for action is that what is happening in the US is an eye-opening, but also what we expect from platforms is not just keep in mind US. Their users are global, like there is a global base, right? So think about users in every jurisdiction. So this is me as Digital Rights Foundation, but I also sit on Meta's oversight board, and I'll just say this out loud. In one of our cases, we actually gave a recommendation to Meta to label their AI-generated content. And because of one of our decision, and our recommendation was implemented, right now 600 million pieces of AI-generated content is being labeled every month on Meta platforms. So we are also witnessing and watching as a board what these content policies change mean for us as well, and how we can sort of interpret those when we'll get cases. But I'll encourage people around the world to report to the board, because we are there as a watchers and not somebody who is there to please Meta and to hold them accountable.
Yeah, I definitely want us to pick up on, when we talk about future solutions, the role that the public pressure campaigns can come in. Before that, I do want to touch upon regulation, because anytime we are talking about harms on the internet, companies are companies, and they're often, we have found that it takes regulation in order for them to make changes that might in the short term appear to not be in their best business interest. But as we've said, as Camille said, in the long term, from an advertiser perspective, it certainly is. And from a user perspective, it certainly is. But let's just take a moment. We are in France, we are in the EU. Alex, I know that your organization is based in DC, but also has a large presence in Brussels. Can you tell me a little bit more about, with the EU AI Act, how you think that is going to affect TFGBV specifically?
Yeah, and I think Nagat's point is a really important one, reminding companies that obviously the political expediency of this current moment in the US is not actually, doesn't reflect the entire global landscape or the long-term expectations of users and your long-term relationship, with your user base and earning their trust. In the EU, I mean, the main directive that really impacts this is actually the Digital Services Act. To speak, sometimes people are so focused on the AI Act, they overlook the value of the DSA in this space, which does have some important language around online gender-based violence. So companies are required to assess for their risks, and there will be a code of conduct that's developed that's going to be one of the next phases of implementation of the DSA around how that looks. One of the reasons why CDT has been excited about that is that it creates a nuanced moment to think through what does good look like from the companies. How do you balance those risks while continuing to respect the freedom of expression and other considerations that we were alluding to before? Blunt regulation in this space can be really difficult because it does involve speech harms. It does involve a risk of censoring people or over punishing people who sometimes may be sharing consensual images, or images generated by a child, for example, a teenager, that may not warrant the heightened penalties that some may sometimes call for. So nuance is required here in these delicate questions of online speech. And so we're looking to this next phase of DSA implementation to be a moment for that conversation. The other thing to note is that the EU did just pass last year their directive on gender-based violence. And so over the next 3 years, countries will be writing their laws to bring that directive into effect. So in the EU, there is going to be a really important moment in the coming years to drill down on this with very tangible, actionable work. We need to do it with human rights considerations as well as safety considerations at the table, but I think there's an important opportunity to do that.
Yeah. And, I'm kind of going through and thinking through all of the suggestions that have been named so far, as we want to transition to what can we do about this. Here we are gathered in the shadow of the AI Action Summit. And there are many problems with AI, or challenges or opportunities that members of the summit will be discussing. However, TFGBV may not be one of them. And so it's a call to action to everybody in this room, as well as those watching on the stream or watching it later on YouTube, to think through what are we currently empowered to do, and what can we work together to do that. And so just kind of echoing what you all have said so far, I'm thinking of, Nikat, you mentioning how the Oversight Board, which of course is a formal institution, was able to pressure for labeling of content. And that, Camille, you're also talking about pressuring consumers. We can vote with our dollars. Alex, I know you and I spoke previously about how can we find common ground? And I think also, Camille, you can come into this too, because this is a US focused example, though I'm sure the lessons can be applied elsewhere, but try to find common ground among people on different sides of the aisle for what should be no-brainers, what should be low-hanging fruit. Like why, for example, is a app that is designed to remove clothing from a person who didn't consent to it? Why is that available on the App Store? That's just one of many. But can both of you speak a little bit more of some opportunities, even in these dark times, that you see?
Yeah, there's some really specific ones exactly like that. And to their credit, a lot of the companies are thinking about this. They just need to continue being able to do it without it being politicized. So I think that's the thing that I'm most worried about, is that there's a chilling effect on really good common sense, trust and safety work. So the App Store, they already have policies not allowing Nudify apps. They need to rigorously enforce those policies and be much more engaged on that than they have been already. We've seen the social media platforms, investigative reporter after investigative reporter has shown how easy and widely accessible the ads for these Nudify apps are. That's a really easy intervention point. Ad policy, lesser protections than impacting people's speech. It's an ad. You can choose whether or not you run it on your platform. let's stop that intervention point. The generative AI companies are doing interesting work around output controls. So being able to do prompt refusal in terms of generating, working with their training data to make it less likely that they can be misused to generate these outputs. So there's kind of technical interventions there. And then, of course, a lot more work around detection and user reporting and user flagging. So here, photo hashing has been a really important innovation for NCII. Somebody can make a takedown request and it can then be propagated across many platforms. Generative AI makes that harder because it is easy to create many small variations on an image. But that's a technical problem. The field can be investing time and resources in that type of takedown mechanism and how we deal with that problem. And then the other area we've been really focused on is user reporting flows too. Right now, it is complicated to know how to take down this content. There's some good places. Stop NCII is one central spot, but not every company is using Stop NCII, and not everybody has the same reporting flows, and they're not always kind of trauma-informed reporting flows that really make someone feel safe as they try and get help for themselves. So again, some pretty common sense, low-hanging fruit where good people in the companies are doing this work. They just need to be empowered, encouraged, and not politicized as they do it.
Yeah, and I think that plays in nicely with something we've said earlier of like not falling into the narrative that caring about the safety of women, of marginalized genders as being woke, right? The ability to not have your image non-consensually spread, like why should that be considered woke? And we also talked about how a lot of trust and safety workers are not necessarily aligned with leadership's actions. That makes me think, Camille, again, as someone previously at a company in a TNS capacity, what do you see in terms of worker collectivization around this problem and pressuring companies? Where are some opportunities that you see there?
Yeah, I mean, there is an opportunity to root the work in data, although one of the problems is there's not a lot of data about how genders, especially minority genders, are targeted and the outcomes that they experience uniquely. That's something that we need to invest in more. But data is the way that tech companies speak, and so leveraging data to demonstrate the importance of the work and the opportunity for remediation is one way that tech workers can do it. Also, everybody has a mama. Everybody has a mama. And if you have a conversation at work with this in that light, rather than making it sound like something that is very, progressive or
academic, social justice language.
I'm trying to protect my mother and my grandmother from this. I'm trying to protect my daughter. There is a way to have this conversation internally that can resonate with more people. And unfortunately, but also aligned to this cause, as more members of Congress, as more political figures in general are experiencing some of this gender-based violence, they are like incensed and motivated to do things about it. And that is on both sides of any aisle, right? And so there's an opportunity to leverage those examples also to advance internal policies, and tech workers are at the center of that. The other thing that's an opportunity is education more broadly. We've seen companies stepping into a more education role and separating it from this specific instantiation of online harm, but talking to the users, informing the users about the controls that are available to them, about their opportunity to make risk-based decisions about how they engage on platforms, on the safety and privacy levers inherent in a technology, like investing in that education piece and making it clear and very user-friendly. That UX piece is really important, making it easy. Even the like in-context reporting that we were just talking about is really important. I don't want to have to move from my workflow or move out of commenting on this thing to be able to report something that's inappropriate. So how do I make that happen in context? And making those changes outside of a specific conversation about gender-based violence or about any kind of online harm is a great way for tech workers to advance tools that help people feel safe and that help remediate this kind of harm.
Yeah, safety serves us all, not just groups that perhaps are not as politically popular among some people in power. Nikat, I wanted to turn to you. You said something that I really liked, which is that the majority world has been dealing with the downsides of these platforms for quite some time, have been working on it for quite some time and organizing on it. Could you perhaps, like, we are getting sort of towards the end of our time, but share a little bit more about this, and especially in this vein of us all talking about, all right, we can collectively pressure. What do you think about members of the global majority pressuring these companies, and how might that look?
So there are like lots of collectives in Latin America, South Asia, and I think they have been working with these companies. For instance, with Meta, they have trusted partners around the world, and these trusted partners, who are mostly CSOs, are basically asset for Meta, because they are bringing real, world experience and telling them what they can do better, like to make their platform safer for users. But maybe this is not relevant to this, but I want to shine a light on somebody who's sitting here. Her name is Theo. I don't know if she's here or not, but she is working with you guys in Human Intelligence, and she was at former Twitter. She worked with lots of groups in South Asia when she was there, and we were working about, like folks inside these companies. She literally saved lives, when people escalated content to her. And I think there are like lots of this experience is now, it's spread all over in the civil society organizations in global north, in others platforms as well. And I guess it's just, just give attention to what we are saying. We have been ignored for so long, in terms of what we have been sharing, in terms of our experiences. A lot of harm that people are now realizing in global north has already been identified. So just go back and see what we have said. We are here to work with you, but it's a lot of free labor that we have been giving for so long. So I think it's a real opportunity for us, while we are thinking about maybe overhauling this system or restructuring it, or telling these companies how they can, like work with all of us. Think about global majority. We are under resourced, and we are exhausted, and we are burned out, and your fight has just started in the US. So maybe we all get thick together how we can push back authoritarian regimes. We have so much experience to tell you how we have done it.
Woohoo. I hope there will be a clinic after this, but everyone chip in for some wine for Nikat for that, so it's not free labor when in France. All right. Well, this has been very illuminating for me, and I hope also for the rest of the audience. Before we do wrap, I guess we'll do a little bit like a lightning style. So this is not what we planned on working on, but just to put you on your toes. What for the upcoming AI Action Summit? What is one particular thing that you would like to see come out of it? It can be related to TFGBV, but it also could be, a broader outcome.
So actually, exactly what Nikat was talking about. I hosted an event on the lead up to the summit, and hosting an event about this topic. But I think that the global majority must be a part of any governance and innovation plans that we have as a world, right? Like, as we are thinking about this, they have unique harms, they have a lot of experience. There is so much opportunity for innovation and excellence, and we need to make those investments. And I think that this summit uniquely, because of the expansion of the topics, there's an opportunity to have a conversation that is much more global and truly promotes the avenues for global collaboration. And so for me, I hope that the AI foundations and anything that comes out of this summit actually is truly global.
Oh, I already said it. So just work together, work with us. We really need to see we should not leave anyone behind. When we say global majority, we're talking about majority world, and not just Europe and North America.
I think I have two. One is it is really easy just to follow the news headlines these days and follow the political winds and think that that is the thing that is going to dictate everything. And there are reasons to take the news seriously. But the overall picture that you get at events like this, in the setting of the summit tomorrow, and who is speaking and what they're speaking about, is that there is a need for governing AI systems, for companies to be them well, and for people to be able to trust them and adopt them. and that there is a business case for this work to move forward. There is a user case as well as a human rights case, and that is what the path of progress looks like, no matter what the political vagaries of the day say. And so that common sense thread of the many needs to prevail. The second thing is moving back now, I will pull it back to GBV and to this space of trust and safety. For a long time, that field has been evolving, but it had been the premise, the remit of a few, right? It was teams inside big tech companies. And the big movement, the progress that we've seen for going on a decade now, is the professionalization of this field. The trust and safety isn't just something we say aspirationally. It is literally a practice. It is a profession. It is a skill. There's a Trust and Safety Professionals Association. You can now study how to do this. One of the things that's going to be announced at the summit tomorrow is an initiative of open source trust and safety tools. And what I love about this is that it's the next phase in the professionalization, that this is no longer just, if you are, the previous panel was saying, well, only the big companies have the resources to really do anti-terrorism work. We can build as a movement these tools. We can make it not contingent on whether one company is choosing to use that tool or not, but we can pull it out and start learning what those best practices are, start resourcing small and mid-sized social media platforms and other companies to be able to engage in trust and safety in a thoughtful way. And so the democratization moment is coming. It's taken a while, but it is coming. And so that announcement tomorrow, it's called the Roost Initiative, Robust, Open, Online Safety Tooling Initiative, announced tomorrow. I think it's just one good example of what creative leadership can look like in this space, and how, again, no matter what the political vagaries are, good old-fashioned like engineering and governance work can continue and prevail, and that we as a community can continue to do that together.
Yeah, I love that. Open fields instead of walled gardens, and we can all flourish there. And it actually does remind me, if you are interested in learning a little bit more about what Humane Intelligence has been up to, but what we're also wanting to do, it actually fits nicely within that in terms of trying to improve the user flow for a survivor or victim of IIA to be able to issue a platform takedown request, which in trust and safety lingo means take this image that belongs to me off your site. But yes, in more poetic terms, if we all do work together and not stay within the silos of these companies and show our collective power, hopefully we can, lead each other to a better world. So thank you so much, ladies. This was really, really inspiring for what can be a pretty dark topic. So thank you.